everyone, me and Buster Green here with what ended up being a really weird video essay based on the Japanese internet reaction for the new Urusei Yatsura trailer. Now, I was originally going to actually review the trailer myself in this video since my announcement video for this anime ended up being one of the best performing videos I made all year, but the post-discussion for this trailer was so thick that it kind of took over what this video is, and I'd rather talk about that and put the trailer review in another video. So, I know some people want me to review this whole series, but I can't do it. I'm super busy reviewing Kamen Rider and Gundam already, and it's Urusei Yatsura, so it's definitely going to run for at least 100 episodes, if not maybe like 500 episodes. We could be back with Lum for a long time is what I'm saying. Anyway, so maybe I'll try again with another video to review the trailers, but this time I got super off topic. So instead, let's discuss the discussion. So the topic that has been heavily discussed on the Japanese internet, and not so much the American internet, is whether or not the new Urusei Yatsura anime of 2022 will lead to the start or the end of a sexual revolution. And that's fascinating. So I guess I should get straight to the point. It's kind of a commonly accepted fact that has become even more apparent in this internet era that certain moments in pop culture can and will ignite a sexual revolution. Or maybe that's more the Japanese phrasing of it, but to boil it down, what we're talking about right now is Urusei Yatsura. In 1981, the first episode of Urusei Yatsura aired in Japan, and in the first episode, Ataru Moriboshi defeats Lum the Invader by exposing her boobs and grabbing her horns and becoming the hero of Earth. Now, this caused something of a mass sexual awakening, kind of watershed moment for Japanese pop culture. Now, if I remember my Urusei Yatsura right, because I've seen the whole show, but I saw it when I was a kid, I don't think Lum is ever blatantly naked again like that for the rest of the show. OVAs and movies excluded, and maybe they might have flashed back to it once or twice in a clip show. But see, this first episode, this is considered by a large number of male and female otakus who saw it back in the day as the moment that anime, matured. Therefore, a bunch of teenagers were watching it when they went through puberty, and for them it was like anime went through puberty too. Because after this, suddenly the 1980s are filled with all these sexy one-shot sexy girl OVAs, and then we get the entire macho girlfriend genre out of Urusei Yatsura, as well as the entire nerd with a girl harem genre, which pretty much thrived so well through the 90s. And all that is just the legacy of Urusei Yatsura. Now, you see, the magical girlfriend trope entered Japan with reruns of Bewitched, but it really only succeeded in Japan when they mixed it into anime. And Urusei Yatsura was the spark that ignited all those good decades of that good magical girlfriend anime. To try and break it down for you guys, if I can try to relate it to some examples I can think of where something similar happened in American pop culture, I can't think of anything that I would straight up phrase as being a sexual revolution like that. But I can think of these critical points in American media, usually TV and film, that cause a large number of kids who saw them when they were young to just grow up with hyper specific fetishes that all stem from those particular moments in history. Just scratching the surface over a quick number of these in American pop culture. The first and most critical one is 1971, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and Violet Beauregard's body inflation death in that movie. Now, this is the first and probably the biggest one on the list. It's possible that there were earlier examples, but I think this is the first and biggest one because 1971 is kind of like a generational point where anyone older than that just wouldn't get on a computer and find like-minded fetishes to talk with about. Anyway, if you're a kid or whatever and you've never seen Willy Wonka or its creepier, more vulgar, but strangely less violent remake with emo Johnny Depp, so what happens is there's a bunch of kids, all of them have these classic movie personality flaws, and almost all these kids die these super ironic deaths until the sole survivor becomes the legal owner of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and legally responsible for the 5 other kids it just killed. Anyway, most of the kids die through pure shocking body horror, and that brings us to the case of Violet Beauregard, who had a thing for blueberries, so in the original 70s version, she dies by horrifically being turned into a blueberry and then pushed into a hole. Now, if you want an alternate, more disgusting, dramatic interpretation of the scene, Wonka's experiments turned her morbidly obese in seconds, and with the rapid expansion of her body, her lungs and blood vessels just couldn't keep up. They couldn't provide oxygen to her suddenly enlarged body, and she turned blue and suffocated, And then they also pushed her down a hole, making it potentially one of the most gruesome deaths in the entire movie. Well, then again, wasn't the first kid crushed to death in a pressurized sewer pipe? Now, Willy Wonka aside, despite the absolute horror of the scene, this just inspired so many fetishes for so many people. And they didn't all have the same fetish, which makes this one kind of stand out from the others. Like on a sliding scale of how different horrible people interpreted this horrible scene in different horrible ways, like you end up with the scene inspiring like literally millions of different fetishes. On the shallow end, we have like pretty much normal people who are just like, I want to date a fat girl, or I want to get my girl pregnant from this and see her blow up. Now, on the other hand, you have the extreme weirdos and the real sickos out there who want to like literally feed a girl until she turns blue, literally feed her till she can't move, and this leads to extremely disgusting, unhealthy force feeding fetishes, morbid obesity fetishes, and on the completely unrealistic end, we just have people who want to see like cartoon ladies blow up with like these extreme inflation balloon fetishes. That was just the first example. I'm also going to point out Disney's Robin Hood from 1973 and also Gadget from the Rescue Rangers in 1989 for triggering two separate generations into going down the path of becoming deranged, furry, sexual deviants who want to have sex with both real animals and cartoon animals. And the less said about them, the better. But some of those real sickos out there have considered Gadget to be a goddess messiah figure, but she's not real. And again, aren't any gods real? Anyway, so this stuff considered on to the present day, and there are even more examples I can throw out here. Like literally every episode of Totally Spies was the writer's barely disguised fetish. And anyway, let's talk about Japan again, because that's the crux of this situation. Now, for much of the 70s and 80s and 90s, anime has had a super relaxed attitude of sex. In fact, sex was a selling point. You buy the anime, you see the nudity, it's a good time. But that was a reflection of Japan's own morality and own coolness with nudity at the time. See, until the Meiji era, Japanese people didn't even wear underwear. They really only started to strictly to impress the British Empire, which had like all these like floofy little ladies with like so many layers of underwear. And then, even then, a majority of Japanese people just prefer not to. British underwear, it's uncomfortable, it chafes in the summer, it's got like leggings. And so they tried to avoid it as best they could until World War II hit, and Japan kind of tried to like normalize itself and change all its habits, and that's really in the last century. So up until the 1970s, having a standard Western-style bathroom with a hot water and a shower was really an extreme luxury reserved for the ultra-rich. So a majority of Japanese citizens until that time were still used to a certain level of community nudity, since the entire town had to use onsen baths to bathe together and all that. So, you'd end up seeing like your entire like high school class naked like at least once. Unfortunately, as globalization pushed through the 1990s, Japanese habits just kind of mellowed out as they tried to like modernize themselves with the rest of the world. But where things get really bad is the past 10 years. In the past 10 years, we have the Me Too movement, which broadly across the board exposed creeps and rapists and the worst types of human scum, especially in Hollywood, where it had to be done. But Hollywood aside, it had a weird ripple effect across the entire world too. And while I wouldn't directly say it was caused by the Me Too movement, nowadays there seems to be this cultural zeitgeist, especially in modern America in 2022, that a majority of adults seem to be turning anti-sex. And, any new films that are intrinsically about sex as a topic are kind of bombing when they're released to mainstream audience. You know the one I'm talking about. Anyway, so back to Japan. Japan is unfortunately not immune to this either. Leaving aside cancel culture cases which have affected both men and women in Japan, accused of various different forms of indecency, especially women who have been caught lying about certain sensitive topics, or really just anyone who's publicly fucked up too hard in this internet age. It's led to this weird blowback where you can see like in American media nowadays, like any modern cartoon, the women just don't have boobs anymore. Like, why would they? Does anyone like boobs anymore? And if you do, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, there's definitely been some push and pull, and it's unfortunately affected our beloved anime otaku media. Certain video game companies have had to think twice about releasing over-sexualized characters in their games, or if anything, they're including them at a premium to like keep it away from the people who don't want it and make the people who do pay for it. And at times, new video games have had their characters toned down sexually for the Western releases. which is the same old censorship bullshit that has always plagued video games since the 90s. But then it was only soccer moms fighting for this, like, think of the children types. Now it seems to be a much larger and much vaguer force at work that I can't exactly put a finger on. But it sucks now because this thing is more mainstream than it ever was. Like, apart from the bikini censoring, the most obvious example I can point to in anime culture is Mineta from My Hero Academia. If you haven't seen the show, he's this annoying perv character. He's just a troll with no value to the story. And he would do disgusting, pervy things to teenage girls. The character was canceled so fucking hard in the West, with like a cancel culture rage that I've seen only normally reserved for Pepe Le Pew, who by the changing standards is now considered in 2022 to be a rapist. Anyway, so people hated Mineta, and in a weird attempt to save the character, they ended up making him bi. So now instead of him being a perverted sexual freak that harasses women, he's a perverted sexual freak who harasses everybody. And that's a diversity win. Now bringing it back again to Urusei Yatsura, like I said, this first epic episode where you see Lum's boobs, that was the moment that launched the 1980s sexual revolution that lasted all the way into the 1990s and maybe all the way into today since they are remaking this anime. It led to hentai, it led to people being sexually attracted to anime. It led to so many sexy anime made from people who wanted to keep that sexy anime flame alive. And it encouraged Japanese teenagers to pursue sexual relationships. And it all started with this light sexual awakening from seeing Lum naked. Now, discourse on Japan, especially on 2channel, is that people are so fully excited for the Japanese Urusei Yatsura remake. Unfortunately, the fate of the Japanese archipelago itself is resting with this first episode of this 2022 remake. Almost as ridiculously as a plot from the show itself, the impact of this first episode may very well save or destroy modern Japan. The popular consideration online is that if they do this episode exactly the way it was done in 1981, Ataru will rip off Lum's shirt, everyone will see her boobs for a good second. GG, Ataru and Lum are married. It will be a moment of lightning striking twice. Japan will experience a second sexual revolution, just like the one 1980s Lum caused. Or maybe it won't, and it won't be a big deal, and no harm, no foul, but at least female artist Rumiko Takahashi's original work will be preserved, and everyone will get that booty shot they want to see. But on the other side of the spectrum, there is just as much concern that if the animators try to G-rate the show down and either obscure or don't directly show Lum's boobs, which I personally honestly kind of think they won't just because of where international television standards are nowadays, everyone is thinking right now that it will have the opposite effect, effectively being a first episode jumping the shark moment, not only closing the book on the 1981 sexual anime revolution, but essentially ushering in a new dark age of more conservative anime that is less sexual, less fun, and more designed to appeal to the tastes of broader international audiences. It'll kind of be one of those fundamental signs of the changing times, like how the Simpsons don't swear anymore ever since Disney bought them out, or you know how like Blockbuster's gone under. And I mean, fundamentally, maybe for you and me, this isn't that big a deal, but it is for Japan because Japanese people have just completely stopped having sex. The women don't like the men anymore, the men don't like the women anymore, the men are too timid to pursue romance, the women are too uptight to commit to a relationship, babies aren't being born anymore, schools are going empty, loneliness is running rampant in Japan, and unfortunately no one's really dealing with it. The situation is so bad, it leads me to bring up Japan's extinction clock again, a clock created by university researchers funded by the Japanese government to predict when the last sad, sexless Japanese human being on Earth will be born. A few years ago, there were relatively enough Japanese people to keep the island of Japan populated until the year 3010, relatively 990 years in the future. Unfortunately, I haven't checked this clock in a while, and unfortunately thanks to the global population blink from COVID-19 in the past 3 years, the doom clock has now accelerated by about 70 years, and now unfortunately the last lonely Japanese baby will be born on October 5th, 2966. I love how they know this down to the day. They literally know that on a cold, wintry day, February 5th, 2966, actually maybe it might not be so cold if climate change models are accurate. But anyway, on that day, the last sad Japanese couple on Earth will have their last unprotected baby making sex for the last time ever. And then I guess they'll just kind of look each other in the eyes and be like, guess we had a good run, huh? And I mean, they'll raise their baby and everything, but he or she won't have any other Japanese people to have sex with because extinction. This conjures this image in my mind that there will just be like this one family camping out in the completely unpopulated ruins of the former Japanese society. Anyway, I guess that's everything I have to say on this topic, which was actually so much that it completely overshadowed my review of the new trailer. All I'll say about it now is that the new trailer does confirm they are redoing the first episode, and that's where all this concern has stemmed from. So I will be waiting and watching to see what happens. If I see Lum's boobs, amazing. If I don't, there's going to be a lot of sad, horny old otakus in Japan. So yeah, that's where we're at. Alright guys, please subscribe. I need 65 subscribers to get monetized. Peace out. Good night.